the filmmaker, Ricky D'Ambrose, and Savina Neirotti from the Biennale College Cinema. Good. I'm going to start with Savina. What was about Ricky's project that made it ideal for the Biennale College?
Well, first thing, the selection process for the Biennale College it's quite. It takes a long time, and there's a lot of people who take part in this process because we do receive a number of projects from all over the world. So we need to be really careful. Also, because we do not select on script, we select on, I would say, early treatments, and we select a team. This is also very important. When we select somebody we feel that can work together with a producer, has an idea, and is able to still work on it. So it's about, we try and select an attitude, let's say a way of doing things, if that's even possible. And that's what we're looking for. So it's fantastic. I do remember your presentation. We also have a video pitch. We look at previous material. We need to have people that know what they're doing, but at the same time are willing to go through the process. And the process doesn't mean that we know what the film is going to be, but you need to want to look for the right tone, the right voice, the right story together with us. And we don't tell you the path, and I hope that's what you felt. We help, we ask a lot of questions. So you really need to want to do the film with us in that sense, finding your voice together. And so you do need a really special type of personality that is very clear about what you want to do, but also open to listening. And well, you have to tell us if this is what you actually found, but in working with us. So the films that we select are very different from one another. If you look at the other films, you'll see they're very unique. You cannot recognize a Biennale College style, but that's what we're proud of. And so I would say we try and find voices, but also a way of working. And in his being extremely reflective and extremely interested in the art of filmmaking itself and how, an idea can actually be put on screen, but also with all your formal interests, I think it was ideal. And we also did most of the college online your year, right? That was very difficult because it was all of it. And that never happens. We're normally on that island. This time we were on screen. So I would say all of these elements, it's very difficult then how we reach the final selection, but we need to find all these elements because it is a tough process. And it's not only about being a talented filmmaker, it's also about being able to endure the process and do a film like this in 10 months. There's quite a lot of stress involved.
I mean, I less than 10 months, really. I mean, we got notified in, I think, December of 2020 that the film was getting the grant. And the other filmmakers who got the grant were all shooting, I think, between January and March. And this was just before vaccinations in the United States for COVID were being rolled out. So the idea was that we would be waiting as long as possible into the year to shoot with the hope that cases would go down. So we shot this time 2 years ago in the first week of May. So I had to shoot it and then edit it, and then it was premiered in September at Venice. Yeah.
But you have made films before, and stylistically very self-assured is one of your trademark. You're very much in control, and I think that this. So, what were the challenges of evolving from a model where you are doing everything and mostly with non-actors, if I'm not wrong, into a structure such as this, where you have deadlines, you were working with professional actors, and so how did you adapt, and what brought out of the work that you didn't expect?
My first feature is this movie called Notes on an Appearance that was made for $30,000, and the idea of being given about the equivalent of $200,000 seemed like a payday. I mean, it didn't. So I'm so used to working with limitations that it just, the format lent itself to the way that I had been working for a number of years. But you're right. I mean, there was an infrastructure that needed to be put in place. I had never shot a period film. I had never shot a movie that involved as many speaking parts and as many locations as this one did. And I had never worked with proper hair and makeup people before. I mean, usually I had been doing all that stuff myself. And this whole experience of shooting this movie really made it clear to me the importance of having good casting directors. I found a good casting team that were able to look at the script and put the names of actors to the characters. And Brian Darcy James, who I think does a very good job in this film. He is for those of you who don't know, he is a very well regarded theater actor. He had just come off of Into the Woods in Broadway this year, but I didn't know him very well. I didn't know his work. I had seen him in Spotlight, the movie Spotlight, but the instincts of the casting director were really pivotal, and that didn't solve the issue of how to work with like working professional actors, which was, it's not like I started reading Meisner or something. I mean, I had to find a way to talk to people that honored their craft, because as you pointed out, in my previous films, it's mainly friends, or maybe they had very limited acting experience, or they came from a different tradition. So this was a real education in becoming acquainted with people who are craftsmen and craftswomen as performers. And I think it really benefited the film. The performance style is very different than in my previous films, and I think it strengthened the film because of that.
And obviously the film has, the roots of the film are in your own autobiography. And how do you negotiate? And I understand that you really want. You've decided. You thought you were going to make these films when you were like 18, or you started thinking about this film.
Yes.
When you were younger. So how do you negotiate telling your story, which it could be like a stream of consciousness kind of thing, and then instead turning into an artistic object where it's almost like you're looking at yourself from a distance.
Well, you're right. I mean, I was 17 when the idea of this movie based on my family came about. It was also first year I was going off to college, and my politics were forming and all these things. But I always thought it would be a film I would make not when I was 34 or in my 30s, that I would be making it when I was 54 or 64. It's because it's a very reflective film, and it's not something I ever thought that I was in a mindset to do. But when you begin to have a producer, Graham Swan, who produced the film, who applied with me for the Biennale College, working with you, you're assembling a team, you're hiring actors who have no direct relationship to your past at all. Yes, you're recreating a lot of things that you have memories of or that you saw VHS recordings of. Shot in my childhood home where my father still lives, in the apartment building he lives in. But at a certain point you have, it's no longer a movie about your family. It becomes a movie in which you are hiring people to do the work, to invent. I mean, Brian Darcy James and Monica Barbaro, who plays Lydia, we never had discussions about, what would your mother say here? Or what would your father say here? They were playing Lydia and Richard. They were playing the Damrosch family. And also, I mean, the boy who's, you call the boy based on me. I mean, he's a redhead. I mean, if I really wanted to do something that was more of a coming of age story that was drawn on deeply personal experiences, I could have done that. But the collaborators, the third person voiceover narration, which gives you a frame, all of this stuff in the movie helps you, even as a viewer, not just for me as the person who has a direct connection to it, but as a viewer, hopefully get out of that mode of a sentimental melodrama of people shouting at each other across kitchen tables, which a movie set in the suburbs about an American family can very easily fall into that trap.
And yet there are moments, and that's one of the many things that I love about the film, where you feel like the shots or the scenes are really like, it's almost like pulled out of your own memory. There is a vividness to places, gestures, and things. So. Can you, I don't know how to ask you to talk a little bit about that, but yes, there are extremely personal moments which, they come across even if filtered by this much more austere and control frame of directing.
I mean, I think of them as the kind of non-narrative, the non-story parts of the film. The boy sleeping on the couch, the very long, I used to just jokingly tell people before they saw this movie, you're going to see paint dry, because there's this very slow shot. But, when you're a kid, I didn't grow up with siblings, and I didn't grow up with the internet. I didn't grow up with all the stuff that, you have the benefit of using to amuse yourself. As a child, you have this uninterrupted fascination with things that as adults you take for granted. Someone peeling bright blue painter's tape is a weird thing for... I think it's still a strange thing, or else I would have cut earlier. I liked looking at it. But I think the movie has to have a certain implicit in is a rhythm of a child's point of view. And that's where that gets into the film. Because, there's also the archival footage of the historical, whether it's the World Trade Center bombing in 93 or TWA Flight 800, that you could say go against what I'm talking about. But actually, I always thought of this stuff as almost as sensory, like sense impressions, like memories, the things I remember seeing on TV. I didn't know what the World Trade Center bombing was in 1993 when I saw it, but I remember the people with the smoke on their faces and the snow in New York City. So it's shown out of context in a way that I think has the same effect as, watching the light patterns on the wall. It's part of that whole same. And
it does have a cumulative effect, because at the end, your character has developed some conscience of political and social conscience, so sort of an opinion on things. Savina, do you remember what were the challenges from the college point of view on this project, if any?
Well, if I remember well, but this is also one of the extraordinary. There was very much. The project was huge. What you see here on screen, I don't remember the first script, but how many pages?
250,
yes.
Something with lots of pop music, Madonna. All this stuff
So
wasn't going to happen.
It was never a problem of, well, we've got to add something here. It was always, how are we gonna, as he's now saying, putting it, cut. But what was extraordinary, and also what made us, in fact, select the team is, and all the tutors said this, because of course there's a lot of people working on the project and giving their feedback, and the idea is that the team will choose what resonates and will find, the question is really, how many questions can we ask so that he can do the best job he can, doing what he wants to do. But you were very good at responding to the feedback that resonated with you. So when and remember this, the tutors were saying it's incredible because we ask questions, we bring up issues, and then they respond. And respond in his way. It's not about, it's really, how are we going to do this? You cannot shoot a script of 250 pages with that budget, and maybe it wasn't even a good idea. And in fact, you see a film that is less
essential.
Yes.
Just to a point.
I heard a story from someone. If I can say this, after the movie was in the can and we were at Venice to premiere. The movie was done. It was finished. One of the tutors we worked with in Venice said to me, we were placing bets. We didn't think this was going to get done.
Well, that's
if someone tested positive for COVID during the shoot, we would have had to have shut down as well. And it was a big risk with as many people on set. There was a real risk that we wouldn't finish the film.
There is one of the quality of the film that makes it so peculiar is this combination of being small and intimate and being epic, because it has an epic ambition. You introduce the news, you use paintings and cars to bring us in different cities. So there is I think a capacity of making big filmmaking with very, very little. And I do not think it's only a function of budget. I think it's a creative function. Am I wrong, or you are just being really smart about not having money and doing things with little?
No, there are things I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to having, I like reading text on screen. I mean, I sometimes think that, not as a principle, but it just makes sense if you are going to have a film that jumps locations to, say, the Bahamas, as this does. You don't need to show them in a hotel. You can have a postcard on screen with the voiceover or the sounds from someplace in the hotel, and that is just as potent or effective as illustrating it, in detail with them in the lobby, them in the hotel. It helps that you're working within a budget, and that it doesn't become as though I'm sacrificing or compromising myself, because it's a style I'm drawn to begin with. But you're right. I mean, also what you're talking about, the kind of epic scale of the movie, I always thought that, when I was writing it, and this was not something I think I ever shared with the application materials, but there were two timelines I in chronological order, I drew out when I was writing the script. One was the kind of things I remembered from my family history. Other things I remembered watching on TV from late 80s, from the end of the Reagan years to the Iraq War. And it was becoming a matter to interlace those things. So you're always being aware of what's changing in the country, and the shifts in the family are mirroring the change in the country. And that was always very important and very impersonal, because unless you were born when I was, it's easy to take for granted that there was an interregnum from like 95 to 2001, where as a kid you were told your generation won't know war, the economy is great, Bill Clinton, Y2K. I mean, it's like all this, this fantasy bubble that gets punctured, but it's part of the white noise of the room growing up, and it informs a lot of what the kid goes through in the film.
Yeah, and his father's trajectory,
Yes.
Financial, perils of. Raise your hand if you have any question. Wow, there is right there. Oh, hold on, she's going to bring your mic.
Okay. Yeah, the visual of the open hand, you started it, the movie started with the open hand. It was that Uncle Joe. Yeah. And then it was at least two other times where that visual, what did that mean to you? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's a kind of prologue into the world of the film, of a figure who is the kind of ghost haunting the movie. I mean, you think of this as a myth, a founding myth of the family, that the movie opens this way with the hand. I mean, maybe this touches on something you were saying earlier about a budgetary restriction. I mean, if I really were up to something else, I could show a hospital room. I could show a patient in the hospital. But it's very effective, I think, or just as effective, to have the hand. And then you see Jesse later on, toward the end of the film, he wakes up with a panic attack and he calms himself down by looking at his palm. There's a parallel, a nice structural parallel there that I thought was important for the film to have a nice bookend. Yeah.
I liked it.
Thank you.
I liked the film.
Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, the casting was terrific, and I think that really made a very big difference. They're very believable characters, almost like tableau, like when you see everybody. I grew up in Nassau County long before you, but my family ranges from Italians to Eastern Europe to waspy people and Spanish and so forth, and you captured it all in the dignities of infighting and relatives and not speaking to each other. So I think that, but the tableau feature, even, little things like the plates and the silverware and I think you took your time with that. I think that was important. So good luck.
Thank you.
Hello. Yes. My question is, as an independent filmmaker, how are you able to convince yourself and others to donate their time, money, effort, etc., into a project that you're not sure will ever come to fruition or be seen by a wide amount of people? How are you able to get that creative spirit flowing amongst yourself and the crew?
That's a good question. Well, I can answer that question in the context of my first feature, which was a Kickstarter campaign to finance for 30 grand, in which I was relying on friends and they weren't getting paid. But it was also very different because I was dealing with people who they didn't have ambitions to be filmmakers or film actors. They were doing it because they were friends of mine, and it was comparatively simple shoot. For this film, I think there was baked into it an incentive, which is that when I had to approach personnel, they knew this was getting a Venice premiere. It was a condition of the grant. It was going to premiere at the Venice Film Festival. Brian Darcy James didn't need the SAG pay rate of $206 a day to be in this movie when he could command any money he wants from a much bigger film. I think he saw the script, saw that it spoke to him in some way, and the Venice premiere made it seem, at least based on what I remember hearing from him, that this was not like a crapshoot. This is actually something that's been vetted in some respects, and that is going to have a proper world premiere. Yes, there were plenty of people I didn't know who I had to hire: the costume designers, the production designers, the people who did the hair and makeup, and they were doing it for very little money. But I think it's a combination of people believing in something because it's been so carefully thought out, and being excited by something that already seems very fleshed out because it's based on things that I have access to. I had VHS recordings I could share with people. I had a family archive. It was a combination, I think, of those two things for this film that sold it to people who ended up working on it.
VHS recording of what?
Beginning with my parents' wedding. I was not alive for that, but I have it. And I have my christening. I have the Christmas scene you see early in the film is based on something that I have a recording of. The 3-year-old birthday party with the clown. I mean, there was a whole archive of stuff that for hair and makeup purposes were very important.
You were filming from a very young age, right?
Yes.
Is it true that you were doing shot by shot remakes of
The Shining? That's right. Yeah. Well, that was at 13. Yeah, I think that's how I learned how to do things. I mean, it's like if you're a painter or if you're like in the fine arts, it's what's the cliche? You learn by trying to copy by hand the things that you consider great. And for me, it was when I was a kid, my father had rented the movie Twister, which incidentally has Todd Field in it, a Helen Hunt movie. And there's a scene in Twister at a drive-in theater, and it's The Shining. And it was the shot of the two girls at the end of the hallway, and it was very brightly lit. And I, as a kid, I was 9 or 10, thinking, what is this movie? It's more interesting than Twister. And so then I through that, I watched The Shining and discovered who Stanley Kubrick was. And leaving aside what I think about Kubrick now, I mean, it introduced me to someone who made decisions, that a filmmaker makes choices: where to put the camera, how to use music, how to cut, how to light a shot. It was very intentional, and that opened up something very useful to me. And hence, making a remake of The Shining was like my one way of trying to learn something. So
it's a question right there.
I have a couple of things. There were quite a few scenes where you're focusing on a visual picture and the dial. You don't see the people who are talking. And I was just wondering why those scenes were that way as opposed to us seeing the people. That was the first thing. After the movie, I was so happy my parents didn't get divorced. So anyway, and the other thing was that your character was clearly like more objective and observant. Everybody else, we kind of knew more about them and their humanity and everything. And your character was kind of, I guess, observing everything. But we did, we knew about what they thought about each other. And I was just wondering about that. But I love the movie.
Thank you. The first question was about the sounds off screen.
When you chose
Yeah.
to do it on screen as opposed to seeing the people actually. I mean, the main one I remember was the broken glass.
Yeah.
And you always see the broken glass and all these people were. But there were more.
I guess it's just because as a kid growing up, maybe people have similar experiences from their childhoods where you are kind of, you cast your eyes down at things that you're not supposed to see. There are things you don't understand, and you focus on other things. And this kind of plays into this thematically. The second thing that you were saying about, I'm sorry, remind me, it was your second. Oh yeah, I mean,
Everybody else, we know what they're thinking about each other. They're emotional.
Yeah.
But he's kind of a blank. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a screen from which I mean, I don't know if you identify with the kid through the movie, but he is a point of reference that I think provides a way into what you're seeing. This goes back to something I was saying earlier. You could very easily make a movie like Richard Linklater's Boyhood, in which you see a kid, one actor aging over 20 years, and you get into his head space, so to speak. And this was not what I was trying to do. It wasn't a coming of age film. It was very clear this would not be a coming of age film, that it would be something else. It would be about a group of people, and without having the boy be a central presence to it psychologically.
The casting was great too with the four Jessies. I mean, amazing.
Oh.
How they looked.
Yeah, people. No one has ever said, "Oh, well, he doesn't have that mark here," and this.
There's a question here. Sorry.
Oh, it came. All right. So 2 questions. The first one is probably a simple one. How would this movie be different if you had $1 million instead of 200,000? And then the second one is, I'm so fascinated by your selection of images that are either primary, and I'm talking now about the various paintings and imagery that you had in there, and then the kind of secondary images that would be behind the characters. How did you choose them and what do they mean?
Well, if I had $1 million to shoot the movie, something that was very important in the script that Venice had read when I had submitted the thing was that the first part of the movie, there would be incidental music playing in the background, not on the soundtrack proper, like in Goodfellas or something, but things that would be barely perceptible under chatter and playing in the car, and that these were pieces of music that I have very specific, very personal connections to because they signify something to me in my own life, but that by part 2 of the film, the pop music would get stuck in 1995, even though we're going to 2005. It was very important that the family rises, music tracks, and then things, I gotta be careful. Things fall apart, let's just say. And that the music therefore wouldn't be keeping up. And that was, I thought, very important to what the movie was. But if I had $1 million, that maybe that would get me the Cranberries song that I wanted to have playing during the Easter egg dying, or maybe an Enya song that my mother's used to play vacuuming. So it would go to music, but probably not to the extent that I would want to. And I don't think that some of the things that I don't like about the movie every time I watch it, that would be improved by a bigger budget, like having a proper wardrobe for the extras in the wedding scene where I see my friends pant with, and I'm thinking, this is not 1987. This is they pulled out of their closet. But hey, no one else points that out. I notice it. But you had another.
Oh, the imagery, the various pictures and paintings.
The film was very carefully storyboarded before I shot, which was a problem, but also was born out of knowing I was going to shoot in a place I grew up. But for all the other stuff and the other rooms, the restaurants, I didn't have access to that. So it was very risky to try to plan all this out. But I knew there was going to be a mural in an Italian restaurant. that you would see that behind. That would be, the mural would stand in for the restaurant at the whole time. And then with the paintings, if you're talking about the paintings in the high school graduation scene, maybe that kind of break up that scene, the paintings on the wall, those were there. I mean, those were, and usually when you have some downtime, you realize, well, let's shoot that and figure out, how it could be used in the final edit.
Would you speak to the title of the film and its meaning?
Yeah, I was I was a little kid, and there was a PBS video called Cathedrals, and it was narrated and produced by David. Yes, who put out a book of I think they were made for children on different subjects, and there was an audio video. There was a video recorded television version of this book on cathedrals, and I thought, well, thinking back when I first started watching this, I thought at a pivotal moment in this kid's life and film, when he's noticing something going wrong down the hallway. He's reading this book. You see the mother come out. She's maybe crying. Something's going on, and it's the first time he maybe realizes that the adults in the room, not that they're conspiring, but there's something that he doesn't understand going on, and it happens to be while he's reading this book on cathedrals. I mean, that there's no, you could, I could tell you how that has some function as a metaphor for the film. I don't think it does. I really do think it's as simple as this very important thing happening in this kid's life while he's reading a book about these very beautiful structures that get, that get built and that last a very long time.
Last question.
So I found the father very sympathetic, and mostly I had seen Brian Darcy James in, lighter fare. There's a lot going on about male shame, and he's getting, tough breaks from the father-in-law, from the new doctor husband, from the green card marriage, and, he's in the printing business. It goes digital. He's getting a lot of tough breaks. Where do you see that character going, 5 or 10 years later? Does he reinvent himself, or is it just get worse and worse?
Maybe there'll be a sequel to this movie. No, my mother, I don't mean to embarrass her, but no, my mother, what this movie doesn't tell you is that it isn't, well, there's a lot of things it doesn't tell you, but it doesn't also tell you that, my mother and my father, her ex-husband, are on good terms. I mean, the Orkins and the Alloways, that conflict that happened there, that's been since reconciled. So there's all this stuff. It's not about what do I imagine them doing. It's what do I know? What's the history that came after it? But I don't show this in the movie because it was very important that 2005 would be the cutting point. 2005 is when the childhood ends. And, if I were a different kind of filmmaker, I would have a card that came up on screen that said, in the year 2007, Judy but that's not the kind of film I made, and that's not the kind of filmmaker I am. So, no.
I think this is all we have time for tonight. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you,
Ricky. Thank you, Savina. And please, Savina, where do they find all the information on the college? We have few filmmakers in here that they might be interested.
There is a Biennale College Cinema website, but you find all information on La Biennale di Venezia website. So you can really,
And when is the submission deadline?
For the 12th edition of the college, the applications start on the 4th of May, and they run until the end of June.
Okay, thank you.